second week in our Biblical Financial Stewardship Sunday School class. And so we have it's a 5-week class, so we're going through, this is week 2. Week 1, we talked about giving. We talked about stewardship and that we are to be stewards of what God has given us. So everything that we have is from God, and God is the owner. We are just stewards of it. And so we need to learn how to steward it according to the way He wants it to be managed, not the way that we want to manage it. So we're looking at some Bible principles and some practical things about how to do that. Last week we talked about giving and about how we need to recognize God's stewardship by giving back a portion of what He's given us. So this week, let's start out. We're going to talk about Gideon for a minute here in Judges 6, 1 through 40. And Gideon, when he was around, the country was oppressed. Judges 6:6 says, and Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. So these were some people in some great poverty. They didn't have a lot. And so then when Gideon was asked to do something for God, he said, his excuse was that his family was poor. He says, and he said unto him, O my Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is poor in Manasseh, and I am the least of my father's house. I don't have the resources to do what you're asking me to do. The whole nation is impoverished. I'm poor. I'm the least. I can't do this. So, yet he had all of the following. He had an animal he could kill for meat. He had flour and broth for the meal. He had at least 2 bulls for a sacrifice. He had at least 10 male servants, and then he had a fleece that he could put out before God to see whether God wanted him to do this or not. So he had all these things, even though he lived in a land that was greatly impoverished, and he considered himself to be poor and to be among the least, and he was using his finances as an excuse for why he couldn't do what God wanted him to do. But we see that actually he did have more than his conversation and his words would seem to have led on. And we often do the same thing. We consider ourselves poor even though we live better than 90% of the people on earth and probably 99% of the people ever that were ever created. We have a prosperous economy, access to advanced medicine, a transportation system and means of transportation unheard of throughout time. And we live in a country with more freedom and opportunity to work than most people even dream of. So we do the same, but we have more. So that means what? You're rich. We're all rich. We live in the top 6.9%. If you make minimum wage, if you just make minimum wage and work 40 hours a week, you make more than 93% of the people on earth. So you are the top 6.9%. You are rich. We're all rich. So you say, but how can I make it every month? I'm not making it every month. I come to the end of the month and there's not enough money left to pay all my bills. And I have all this debt and I have all these problems. What's wrong? Well, there's 2 things that could be wrong. You could have a burning problem, or you could have a spending problem. Or you could also call these an income problem or an expenses problem, a getting problem or a keeping problem. It's all the same thing. Either you don't have enough coming in, or you have too much going out, or you have some combination thereof. So if you have an earning problem, God provides primarily through our work. So here are some references for verses that talk about God providing through our work. That's how He wants to provide for us mostly. Sure, sometimes God provides us in other ways, for us in other ways. But most of the provision He provides for us is through our work and our ability to work. Not providing for your own house is akin to denying the faith. 1 Timothy 5:8, but if any provide not for his own house, and especially for those, or not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. So this is an important thing to God, that we be working, that we be providing for our own needs, for the needs of our house. A laborer is worthy of his hire. If we don't work, we shouldn't eat, the Bible tells us. Proverbs 9 tells us, 2 Thessalonians 3:10 says, for even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. This sounds like a saying that some wise person might have said. No, this is a biblical thing. This is a biblical principle that if you're not working, you shouldn't be eating. These things should go hand in hand. We should all be doing the work that we can do. Our work should be like the ants. So there's a couple different passages that talk about that, but ants were not lazy. Did you ever see a lazy ant? You watch the ants and you're like, oh look, that one, he's definitely taking a break. They don't do that. They don't take breaks. They're not lazy. They are self-motivated. There's no one saying, go do this, go pick up that little grain, go take it over here. They're self-motivated. They know something needs to be done and they just do it. They prepare for the future. They set aside during the summer when they can gather a whole lot of food, they set it aside and they save it for later, and then they're hard workers. They work very hard to do the things that they do. And it's just an ant. We should learn from the ant and be more like one. And then we can look at why the virtuous woman is praised in Proverbs 31. If you read through that passage, you can see in verses 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, and 27, all of those verses praise her for her work in some way or another. So work is an important thing. And why is the virtuous woman virtuous? Primarily, it would seem, because of her work. So, earning is an important thing that we should all be working on. Now let's look at spending for a little bit. We're told to seek the kingdom of God. Proverbs 8:18 says, riches and honor are with me, yea, durable riches and righteousness. So the things of this world offers, money, resources, the things that we can buy, they don't offer something that's really durable. All of it will eventually perish in one way or another. But what God offers to us are durable riches, the riches of righteousness. That's something that will matter, that will last for eternity. Don't lay up treasures on earth. We shouldn't be seeking the things of this world. We should be laying up treasures in heaven. And then be content. Philippians 4:11 says, not that I speak in respect of want, for I've learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. If we have a spending problem and we're out there buying things and attaining things, we haven't learned to be content with the things that we have. Because we're always desiring to get more, to buy more, and to satisfy that need, when we should be content with the things that God has given us. Honor God with how you spend your money. This will help with your with the spending problem. If you look at every single thing you buy and say, will this thing that I am about to purchase honor God? Will this honor God by having this? God be honored more than if I don't buy this. Will God be honored more by not buying it? Often we can look at it and say, yeah, he might be honored more if I don't buy this than if I do buy this. Don't labor to buy things that do not satisfy. And we can all probably think back into the past about things that we've purchased in the past. that didn't satisfy. They didn't come up and meet our expectations. We thought, oh, if only I could get this thing, it would meet this need and it would be good. You know what? I didn't prepare this illustration, but I thought of this. So I saw this really neat keychain thing online, and I watched it. They had these videos and they showed how you could do this thing, and it would, all your keys could fit in it, and you could just flip them out, and it was really compact. I hate keys, so it really appealed to me, and I thought, oh, if I could just get that keychain thing, I thought that would just be the greatest thing. And so I bought it, and I took it home, and then I realized, you know what, this doesn't go in that, this doesn't go in that, and this doesn't go in that, and this doesn't go in that. And I was all disappointed. I was like, this perfect be-all, end-all keychain thing just was not all it cracked up to be. And we do that with a lot of things we buy. They don't satisfy. Even those things that do meet some sort of need, they may meet the need, but they're not necessarily there to satisfy. And we shouldn't look to them for that. So, spending, live within your means. We shouldn't be buying things that aren't within our means. We're not meant to buy and have everything that's out there. There are things that we shouldn't have. And when we realize this, it'll help us with our spending problem. Don't love the things of the world. 1 Timothy 6:10 says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." You want sorrows? Then love money. You want to avoid sorrow? One of the things you can do is make sure that you're not loving money. You're not loving things that money can buy. And then you're not, and it will help you to not spend. Wisdom is required in spending. So, let's look at this. So, is my spending reasonable? So here I have a graph showing some after giving and after taxes percentages. So, and I have a handout for this that I'll give you when we're done. But basically, if you take your income and you say what percent, and you take your giving off the top, take your taxes off the top. I'm not going to address those here in this graph, but your spending should roughly be within these parameters. You know, give or take 5% or so. If you're extremely poor or you're extremely rich, then these numbers would be skewed some. For example, someone who has a very low income would likely spend a higher percentage on food and lower on everything else. And someone who has a very high income, their food budget would probably go up some, but it wouldn't go up as much. And so they would have a lower percentage for food. So this is just kind of a guideline so that we can look overall at our spending and say, do I have something in my life that is out of whack? That, you know, maybe it's housing, and if you look at your housing and you're spending, you know, 70% of your income on your housing, then maybe that's out of whack. Maybe you have too much house, and that's the problem. That's why you're in debt. That's why you have a spending problem. Or, you know, you can look at any of these other things and say, is this out of whack? Is this not within what is a normal parameter? And so this is from multiple sources put together, and so these aren't necessarily an exact fit for everyone. It's just something to help you think about your finances and think, is there any one category, any one area of my spending that is out of the norm? So you'll notice one thing, besides the things I already mentioned, that is not on this graph, and that is debt. I did not show any debt on that graph. Why? Because Christians shouldn't have debt. Christians shouldn't go into debt for almost everything. There are a few caveats, things, you basically don't want to go into debt for things that go down in value, and you don't want to go into debt for anything beyond the time frame of a month. So those would be my guidelines for what would be allowable debt. So if it's an extreme short term where you do this, you're going to pay it right back, I might say that's okay. And things that would go up in value if it's like a house, for example. So the Bible doesn't prohibit it. There's no verse that says you should not go into debt. But there are verses that talk about debt and talk about it as being a bad thing. So the Bible says that the borrower is the servant to the lender. It says the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. So when you have debt, you are in servitude. You are a servant to the master. The master is whoever you owe the debt to. You have become a servant. And so them as being the rich, the person who you have the debt to, is ruling over you. God's people, the Bible talks about in many places, are givers, not borrowers. You can't really be a giver if you're a borrower. If you're constantly borrowing money to meet your needs or to meet the things that you want to buy, then you're not going to have that surplus to be able to give to others when they have a need. But God's people are givers, not borrowers. Psalm says, the wicked borroweth and payeth not again, but the righteous showeth mercy and giveth. Notice it didn't say the wicked borrow, or the righteous is the one who borrows but pays it back. It says the righteous is the one who is a giver. They didn't even borrow to begin with. They are the giver in this situation, in this example. Borrowing is sometimes shown in the Bible as a punishment for disobedience. So the fact that you don't have enough money to cover your needs is shown in certain places in the Bible as something that this is a punishment. Your punishment is now you will be the servant to a master because you will have debt owed to them. So, yeah, we are instructed not to help others go into debt. So, God doesn't want us to go into debt. And one of the ways we know that is because He instructs us not to help others go into debt. Proverbs says, be not thou one of them that strike hands, or of them that are sureties for debt. When you say, I'm going to be the person who will co-sign for your debt, you're allowing this other person to go into debt. They may not be able to get the financing themselves directly, but they can get it if you are a surety for them, if you will co-sign for them. The Bible doesn't want them to get into debt, and so it instructs us not to do that so that they won't go into debt either. We are always to meet our obligations. Romans says, owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. So we should always be able to meet our obligations and have enough money to do that. Okay, so if you have any debt today outside your house and you can't write a check today to pay it off, then you are by definition broke. And there are certain things that should not characterize people who are broke. But in our society, because of the ready availability of debt, being able to put something on a credit card, there are a lot of things that debt people shouldn't do, or that in-debt people shouldn't do, that they do. And so we'll just look over some of these things that in-debt people shouldn't do. Broke people should not buy new or expensive cars. They are broke. They don't have the money to be able to do this. They shouldn't be out there buying cars that they most certainly can't afford, because they are by definition broke. Broke people shouldn't be in a restaurant they aren't employed at. Buying food at a restaurant is quite a bit more expensive than making it at home. If you are a broke person, broke people should not be buying expensive food in restaurants. Broke people shouldn't be buying name brands. So you look out and you say there's name brand this and there's a generic this. But you say, but I don't like the generic as much. Broke people don't buy name brand stuff. You're broke. You shouldn't be doing that if you're broke. Broke people shouldn't be lending money to other broke people. Broke people shouldn't be giving lavish presents. So it's nice that you want to give to other people, but when you're broke, you shouldn't be giving lavish gifts to other people. You should be thinking, how can I make something for them? How can I do something for them so that I don't have to use the little bit of money I have that I should be using to pay off my debt? How can I give them a gift still? And then, isn't it the thought that counts? Isn't that what we always say? We always say the thought counts in the gift. Well, make the thought count. Do something that is thoughtful. If you're a broke person, though, you shouldn't be giving lavish presents. Broke people shouldn't be taking long, frequent, or expensive vacations. Those are things that people who have money do. And you say, but I can put it on the credit card, therefore I can afford it. No. You're by definition broke if that's how you're solving the problem of being able to do this. And if that's how you're solving it, you're broke and you shouldn't be doing it. Broke people shouldn't expect help from other people or the government. Now, that doesn't mean that as believers, when we see another believer or someone who's in need, that we shouldn't have compassion on them and help them. We should do that. That is a Christian, biblical thing to do. But as the person who is broke, we shouldn't expect other people to help us in that way. We shouldn't expect people, we shouldn't expect the church, we shouldn't expect the government to do it. As a broke person. Broke people should not be without a plan to change things both short-term and long-term. So, if you're a broke person, you say, short-term, I need to start turning this around. I need to start going in the direction away from being broke and not further into the hole. And so you need to create a plan. Maybe that's okay, I'm going to take on another part-time job. Maybe that's we're going to drop these expenses. Just different things that you're going to do short-term to say, I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to stop. I have a goal to be not broke. And then you should have long-term goals as well. Think, if your problem is an income problem, maybe there's some training that you need to get, maybe a certification, some education, to say, you know what, I can get a better job or I can move up in my job more if I get this. So you have a long-term goal saying, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, I want to be here and here's how I'm going to get there. And that's going to help me not just get out of debt, not be broke, but continue to not be broke, not go back into that. Broke people shouldn't have anything with a motor that isn't necessary for work, church, transportation, or for the maintenance of their home. Broke people shouldn't be saving for retirement, kids' college, vacations, etc. So if you're broke, then you really shouldn't have hardly any savings to speak of. You should have a little bit of savings for an emergency fund. All of your resources, everything you have, should be going to take care of that debt. When that debt is taken care of, then you can start considering the things that you need to save money for. Now, I would make an exception for certain large, unavoidable expenses that you can see very close down the road, and you say, well, but I need to stockpile a little bit of cash so that I can cover this expense, because otherwise this expense is going to make me go further into debt. Okay, that's a reasonable thing. But as far as long-term things, you shouldn't be giving toward retirement. You shouldn't be putting money away in a 401k or an IRA, things like that, when you're broke. Broke people shouldn't spend money on games of chance. No one should actually, but particularly broke people should not be spending money on games of chance. Proverbs 13:11 calls this wealth gotten by vanity. Broke people shouldn't be without a thorough understanding of their debts, minimums, and prepayment penalties. So, if you're a broke person, you should know how much you're in debt, who the creditors are that you owe, how much you owe them. These should be things that are ready in your mind to be able to tackle them and to take them on. Lots of times people who are broke, they tend to just put those off to the side and they don't want to think about them. They don't want to confront how broke they really are, and so they don't think about them, so they have no idea how in debt they are. By bringing that into focus and putting it before you and understanding and knowing where you're at, it can help you see how far in the hole you really are and how much you really need to do to get out. And that's recognizing reality. Broke people shouldn't be without an understanding of what caused the debt. So this is more of a think through the various debts. And so, I got these 3 debts here. What caused this debt? Why am I in this debt? Well, maybe this one was my washer's broke and I went to the store and I had enough money to buy this one, but they offered me a store credit, and so then I could buy this other one that was really nice and did blah, 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 blah stuff. And that's how I got that debt. And then this other debt, well, that's, I had enough money and then I had an injury and I broke my arm. So I was out of work for a little bit, and I had to do some therapy and different things, and some hospital bills. And so all of the normal expense, my money went toward that, and so then my normal expenses I had to put on a credit card, and so that's what caused that debt. And essentially that's saying it's because I didn't have an emergency fund, something to cover those emergencies, that's why I got that debt. And this other debt, well, maybe it was Christmas and we wanted to buy this thing for the kids, so that's how we got that debt. So think through each debt that you have and say, why do I have this debt? Why am I a servant because of this? Why am I a servant because of this? Why am I a servant because of this? Get an understanding of those causes, and then you can work toward preventing those from being causes of further debt. Broke people shouldn't consolidate debt. Debt consolidation makes things look smaller. You can take the same amount, put it all in one pile, and it suddenly looks smaller. The person who has trouble thinking about all of the debts that they have, they don't have as much trouble thinking about it when it's all in one nice, neat little thing with one nice little amount to pay. But you know what happens when they do that? Once they consolidate it down to one, suddenly it's easy to get a second, because it's just 2 then. It's very manageable, and now we still understand it, we're still thinking about it, but then they add another one and another one, and they're right back where they were, only now they're even worse because they did that consolidation originally, so they had just as much debt. They didn't decrease their debt at all. They just decreased the number of piles it was in, and so it seemed smaller. It felt smaller to them. And then broke people shouldn't be without a plan to eliminate their debt. So we're going to talk about a debt elimination plan. Step 1. These are a couple steps that we're going to go through for a debt elimination plan. Step 1, add up your bare minimum expenses for 1 month, including minimum debt payments. And a spending plan will help with this. We'll talk about a spending plan next Sunday. But for now, just add up the bare minimum expenses, the things that you have to spend money on every month. leaving out anything that you could drop and still be fine, that you could drop and still make it, that would not be necessary. So your minimum, including the minimum debt payments you have, the minimum amounts on every single debt, so that you know how much is there. Step 2, if your current income can't meet this, so if you look at your current income and your bare minimum expenses are greater than your income, then you have a problem here. And so then you have to figure out, do I have an earning problem? Is it over here where there's just not enough coming in? Or do I have a spending problem? I'm pushing out too much all the time, and that's the problem. Or do you have a little bit of both? Could be that. Could be a little bit of both. And so then you need to figure out where that is and say, how can I address this spending problem? How can I address this earning problem? And you develop a way to address those in step 2. And then step 3, investigate alternative ways to pay debt. So these are things like one-time things that you can do that are going to, really push hard to eliminate debt. You're going to sell things. You're going to look through your house and say, I can sell that, I can sell that, I can sell that. I really like to keep that, but I can't sell it. That can go toward paying off my debt. You can temporarily stop subscriptions to things, temporarily stop trips, stop coffee, whatever it is that you might be spending money on. Investigate those ways to help there. And then step 4, take any money above and beyond the bare minimum and apply it towards your emergency fund and then to your debt. So here's how I view this. I have a debt. This is your debt pits that you have. And in this case, I'm showing paying off debt as adding water to the pit. So this pit here in RD is almost completely full. That debt is almost paid off. You've almost conquered that one. And so here we have our income. Our income is a faucet that's adding water in. That's adding something that's going to be able to take away our debt. But here we have an emergency fund. So I showed it as a pitcher of water. So you get this pitcher of water, and the first thing that you fund after you've paid your bare minimum expenses is you put it in that pitcher. That's your emergency fund. You need to keep some resources on hand so that when an emergency happens, instead of saying I'm going to pay for that with my credit card and go further into debt, you say I have money set aside to take care of that. That's what I'm going to use to pay for that emergency fund. I am not going to go further into debt. So that's also called a rainy day fund. Some people call it that. That's your emergency fund. So then, as you work that debt elimination plan and you go through those 4 steps to eliminate your debt, what you do is you put your debts from smallest to largest. So here we put them smallest to largest. So this is our smallest debt here, and then this is our largest debt over here on this side. And so you pay on this debt first. You put all the extra resources that you have, anything you could find, things that you can sell, extra earning, and you put it toward this small debt. And then when that one gets paid off, then you tackle the next largest one. So you tackle your debts from smallest to largest. And so then by the time you get down here, you're getting down that slope. By the time you get down to this one, you won't be paying minimums on any of these other ones. So you'll be able to take all those minimum payments and apply it toward your largest debt, which will help you pay off that largest debt faster than if you chose to attack it first. It also gives you a psychological advantage, because when you think about tackling this huge debt, it's like, oh, it's going to take forever. It's going to take a long time to do. We're never going to pay that off. But you think about this and you say, well, you know what? I might be able to get that one out. I might be able to do that because, if I get this other thing and do this and I sell this, I can take care of that. Wow. And so you get that paid off, and you get a little bit of a celebration of, yes, I got one out. And then it repeats on down the line. And so you'll pay it off a lot faster if you work it like this. And some people call this a debt snowball. It's because the snow gathers as you go downhill here. As you get further and further, you have, the further you roll a snowball, the more snow accumulates on the snowball. And so the further you get down in your debt snowball, the more resources you have to attack the larger debts. So you do this every month while you're in debt. If you're in debt, you should do this every month. You should go through these steps, adding up the bare minimum expenses, and then seeing, do I have enough to cover it? Do I have an earning problem? Do I have a spending problem? Investigate alternative ways to pay that, and then take the money and apply it, everything above and beyond the bare minimum, toward your emergency fund first, and then to your debt. And then just repeat this. Repeat it every month until the debt is eliminated. So here's some other thoughts. When emergencies come, don't panic. Avoid new debt. Use the emergency fund and then replenish and restart it. So you say, I have this money set aside, but an emergency came up. Okay, that's fine. Use the money. Pay for that emergency. Take care of it. Now, save up some money first. Don't pay your debt off yet. Save up some money first so you have money for the next emergency. And then go back to paying off your debt. Restart your debt snowball type thing. How big should your emergency fund be? I say $1,000 is a good minimum. A little bit less if your income is very low. It could be higher if your income is higher, because you have the tendency to have larger emergencies the larger your income. My wife has always said $1,000 will never cover any emergency. Well, it does cover some things. But she does have a point that sometimes emergencies will come that are larger than this. So another guideline that I like to think of is I think of what my bare minimum expenses are for the month. And I say, that's my emergency fund. That's how much I should have on hand. Because if I have an emergency at any point, I know I have enough money to cover my expenses for the rest of the month. Even if I'm not able to work for the rest of the month, I know I have enough money to cover that much time frame. That gives me a definite period where I have time, I can figure out what to do. Do I need to do something alternatively to make income? Do I need to sell something? What can I do so that when I reach the end of that month and I no longer have enough money to cover my expenses, that I don't go into debt at that point? And so I like to say everyone should have at least 1 month's worth of expenses on hand. And it provides a couple other benefits as well. You can think about it when you go to pay a bill. You don't have to think, do I have enough money at this moment to pay this bill? If it's part of your bare minimum expenses and you have 1 month of bare minimum expenses saved up, there's no thought to it. Of course I have enough, because I always have enough to pay my bare minimum expenses for 1 month. So you just pay it. You don't hesitate. You should grow your savings more when you're out of debt. And we'll talk about that more in week 4, about growing our savings. So after you're out of debt, you should think about having available 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, and not necessarily in a designated fund where I say this is my 3 to 6 months of emergency fund available to me, but some sort of savings that is accessible, that if you were in an emergency of some sort, that you could say, I can use this. Yes, I'd like to use it for thus and so, a new kitchen or a trip or something, but I don't have to use it for that. An emergency comes up, I'm gonna use it for that and not for this other expense. So that is the last. I do have this other slide about Ecclesiastes 5:10 through 19. So if you get a chance, you could read through that. I think it's a very good passage on finances and thinking about our proper way of thinking about the money we have and how we should use it. But I'm not going to cover it specifically. Let's close in prayer. Dear Lord, I pray that you would help us as we think about our finances and think about any debts we may have. I pray that you would help us be able to get a plan, put it together, and to work the plan, to think about ways that we can get out of debt and to actually do it. And then we can turn and we can serve you with all of our resources that you've given us. Help us to do so wisely, I ask in Jesus' name.